Hello there, amazing viewers and subscribers, and welcome to a new Doctor Who topic video for today. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Time Lords, a bit like I did with the Santarans. So let's sit here with our funny robes, with the nice pointy hats, and talk about the Time Lords. Now, the very first time we actually see a Time Lord isn't in chronicle order, really, for the Time Lords. We basically see one Time Lord in the William Hartnell era, aka the Meddling Monk. Now, this appearance of a Time Lord actually happens in the story called The Time Middler, starring William Hartnell's Doctor. And we do know how that works out, with the Doctor tricking him and taking his demilitarization circuit bit to make his TARDIS shrink down. And of course, he does return in the Daleks' master plan. The Meddling Monk really only has two stories appearances. Big Finish has kind of adapted him to come across Hartnell's Doctor, and of course John Pertwee's Doctor, even Sylvester McCoy's Doctor. The Meddling Monk has returned, but I'm not really going to talk about the Big Finishers because I don't have any of the Big Finishers stories to feature Time Lords apart from the Time War stuff, and of course Gallifrey Series 1, Story 2, Square 1. So, jumping into the second Doctor scene now, the Time Lords made their very first full-on debut in the War Games, starring Patron as the second Doctor, leading in. So, really, the War Games is basically about the War Chief being a Time Lord, and then basically the Warlords basically go and kill him, and then the Time Lords interfere because the Doctor having to call for help via the Time Lords to put everything back to right. And then, even though the Time Lords do interfere in that course of plan and really punish the Warlords, they punish the second Doctor as well for interfering in other people's and planets' affairs, which really no Time Lord should do. But the second Doctor gives out his flout argument saying why he did it and everything, and that he would carry on doing it. And the Time Lords didn't really like that, so you know what happens. They put him on trial, and then during that trial, they literally decide to put him in exile and make him change his appearance, leading to the third Doctor's era. Now, the Time Lords basically do interfere in the third Doctor's life quite a bit, because we see one Time Lord warning the Doctor about the Master in, of course, the Terror of the Autons, where you got the Time Lord literally talking about the appearance of the Master. Now, this is the very first story to feature the Master. So here's a picture of all the Masters, and it's Roger Delgado's Master. So this is the favorite story we have for the Master, but I'm going to be doing a different sort of video. I'm going to be doing a whole video talking about the Master and their appearances through Doctor Who's history. There again, the Time Lords did again make a little cameo in the Connery in Space, where they find out the Masters basically got into Gallifrey and took information about the Doomsday Machine, which is basically what Connery in Space is about. And then they literally send the third Doctor to go and deal with the Master, really, to go and do their dirty work for him. You know, they don't want to get their hands dirty, so they just go and send the Doctor to stop the Master. And then the Time Lords did return in the Three Doctors, when really Omega, the proper Time Lord, the one that helped the Time Lords have create the ability to time travel, was trying to come through his power, well, through his universe, a black hole of antimatter, and it was draining Gallifrey systems. And then, of course, Gallifrey has to rely on the first three Doctors, and as all the Doctors basically deal with Omega and everything, the Doctor really gets his freedom to go back into time and space. Jumping into his next incarnation, the Fourth Doctor. The Fourth Doctor did really meet one Time Lord in his first season, in Genesis of the Daleks, where this is the point where the Time Lords were trying to interfere in the Daleks' basically creation. They want the Doctor to interfere, stop them from being created, or basically try and make them less dominant creatures of the universe, which really Russell T Davies says this is the first act of the Time War. So, which is really interesting. The Time Lords did return quite a few times. I mean, we got the brain of Morbius when we find out the Time Lords executed one Time Lord, but the only bit of that Time Lord basically survived is his brain. So we do see not Morbius properly, but we do hear his voice through the brain in the brain of Morbius. Then, of course, we jump into the Deadly Assassin. So the Fourth Doctor says goodbye to Sarah Jane, gets a call, and goes to Gallifrey. And then, of course, this is another Master story. This is the very first time we actually go to Gallifrey. This is the first time we see the Cathedral of the Time Lords, where you see them getting a present, and the present is basically shot down by the Master, technically. Technically it's the Master, technically it's the Doctor through... It's the way how you look at it, really, because even though the Doctor thinks it's him, but it's actually, in fact, it was the Master shooting him bop, literally triggering that sort of image into the Doctor's eyes. I do like this Gallifreyan story. I like the guards as well. I think the guards have got a great costume as well. Then after the Fourth Doctor leaves, basically after defeating the Master, and the Master gets into his TARDIS and escapes Gallifrey. And I love the way those two times turn to each other. I don't think the universe is going to be big enough for the two of them. Which basically isn't. And then, of course, we jump into the next story with the Time Lords appear. It is, of course, the Invasion of Time with the Vardans. It's using the Fourth Doctor to try and get into Gallifrey's systems, leaving to the Fourth Doctor to basically damage the boundary of Gallifrey. And then, of course, the Santarans also invade Gallifrey, leading the Doctor to create the weapon from Rassilon, and that's another Time Lord story as well. Then the Time Lords really take a bit of a break, because the only Time Lord we see after this literally point in the Doctor's time stream, he meets up with Romana, who helps him find the key to time, helps him to defeat the Daleks, literally stopping with Scavrov, go to E-Space with him, and depart in E-Space. So we do have Romana. The next time we actually see the full-on Time Lords, it is not until the Arc of Infinity, with the return of Omega again. Omega is trying to cut into our universe, and he wants to use the Doctor's body print. And of course, the Time Lords think it's the Doctor betraying them, so they literally try and, you know, exile the Doctor. Instead of exiling him, they try and exile him from his life. And this is the very first time we actually see Colin Baker as another Time Lord. He's not the Doctor. He is the next Doctor after this, after Peter Davison, but he plays Commander Maxwell in this story. And then, of course, you know, everything gets found out. They find out Omega is using the Doctor's body print. They find the traitor. The Doctor goes to Earth, stops Omega, and that's really it for the Time Lords. Or is it? The Time Lords then again return in, of course, in the Five Doctors. Now the Doctor's old friend that we've seen from the Deadly Assassin into this story, aka Barusla, who's also known as the President of Gallifrey, he literally takes the Doctors out of time and space. So we kind of see the Fourth Doctor get kind of trapped. We have the first, second, and third Doctors on Gallifrey with Sarah Jane, Susan, the Brigadier, Tegan, and Tarlo, as well as some old villains, so that Rassilon could use them to play in the game of Rassilon. Now, the game of Rassilon is trying to find out who wants immortality. So, Barusla, being the greedy bugger he is, and he has really bad character development from his first story that we see him in, and into this story he just wants everything gone. He just wants to become the whole kind of, he wants immortality, and then of course Omega just turns him into, not Omega, sorry, Rassilon just kind of turns him into this kind of statue thing for the rest of time. Then the Time Lords then again return to Doctor Who in Trial of a Time Lord. Again, the Doctor is put on trial, and not just by the High Council of the Time Lords. He's actually been put on trial by his own self, a darker version of the Doctor that exists somewhere in between his final and 12th incarnations. Well, it's between his 12th and final incarnations, literally the 12th Doctor and the 13th Doctor, probably. We don't know where that is now in the Doctor's time stream, thanks to the whole Timeless Child story arc. So the Valeyard basically wants to steal the Doctor's remaining regenerations, and he does get found out. The High Council gets found out as well, and that's when we leave the Time Lords in Classic Who. Since then, the Time Lords had quite a few stories in Big Finish, with the Sixth Doctor basically going to Gallifrey to fight against Daleks with Romana, and then of course we go to the Eighth Doctor's timeline with all the Time Wars, with the Time Lords interfering in the Eighth Doctor's time stream, and then of course the Time War happens and everything. I really need to get into more Big Finishes of the Time Lords. So the Time Lords really did return on TV screen back in 2007 in a little bit of a cameo, when the Doctor's talking about the Untethered Schism, where the Time Lords take children to look into the power of the Time Vortex itself, which led the Master to go insane. We have them in a little bit of a flashback. The Time Lords did actually proper return in the End of Time Parts 1 and 2, with the return of Rassilon in the final days of the Time War. So they're trying to survive, you know, and everything's going on, and Rassilon's being a massive idiot like always. Only to get defeated by the Doctor and the Master, really by the Master, because the Master basically uses his lightning powers to kind of knock Rassilon out, and Gallifrey goes back into the Time War after trying to use the Master to break out the time lock through the 4 drums in his head. Then again, the Time Lords basically returned in the 50th anniversary in Day of the Doctor. So we kind of see more of the Time War. We see the Daleks, we see a guard and the War Doctor interfering, and we see Time Lord children in robes and people begging the Daleks for mercy, and the Daleks don't really give mercy. And then, of course, all of the previous Doctors, not the Timeless Child Doctors, from William Hartnell's Doctor down to Matt Smith's Doctor, even a little bit of a cameo from Peter Capaldi, all 13 Doctors come to save Gallifrey. And Gallifrey's put into a parallel pocket universe where it's still there in the next Doctor's era in Peter Capaldi, because the 12th Doctor ends up back on Gallifrey after the Time Lords kind of kidnap him to try and have information about the hybrid. And of course, Rassilon has regenerated once again. We got the Time Lords betraying Rassilon, working with the Doctor, getting Rassilon kicked off his entire planet. And that's really the end of the Time Lords, because even though the 12th Doctor basically breaks Clara out of the Time Lock before she dies in between one heartbeat and the next, and then they literally run away from Gallifrey, and he basically has his mind wiped about the whole event, and that's really it for the Time Lords. Until 2020, where we find out the Master went back to Gallifrey, broke into the Matrix, found out stuff about the whole Timeless Child story arc, and basically find out the Shobogans, including Tectalum, basically inject the regeneration ability to make them become Time Lords. So that's really it for the Doctor Who in the Time Lords, kind of from the TV era. I don't really know much about the big finishes yet. I need to listen to more big finishes. The Time Lords, I have to admit, I do kind of like them, even though we do have other Time Lords basically out there, like the Medanin Monk. We also have the Irani. We have Susan, the Doctor's granddaughter. We also have the Master out there. And now and again, I think some Time Lords are still alive. I think there's still Time Lords out there, like Romana and stuff. So yeah, that's a little bit for this video. I hope you enjoyed me talking a bit about the Time Lord story. If I've missed any information, please let me know in the comments. Please do like, subscribe, and share. And join me for more awesome Doctor Who content. Have a cracking day.